Are Canada's ticket gates designed for dogs? The words hung in the air of the Paris television studio, followed by an eruption of laughter. The panel of commentators couldn't hold back their smirks, and the live audience roared. On the large screen behind them, footage from Toronto's Union Station played, showing a morning rush hour where commuters moved with an uncanny orderliness through a series of low, thin gates that opened and closed with a quiet flick. This is what passes for world-class railway infrastructure. You must be joking, said the woman who had made the comment, shrugging with theatrical disbelief. She was Alice Durand, an engineer for France's national state-owned railway company, SNCF. She crossed her arms, a look of haughty confidence on her face. Our TGV turnstiles are fortresses of solid steel. A child could vault over these without a second thought. The show's host, playing along, chimed in, "Indeed. I think the door to my dog's kennel is more robust than that." The audience laughed again. It's as if they have no concept of security. Are Canadians just too trusting for their own good? In that atmosphere, thick with mockery and disdain, Alice nodded in satisfaction. To her, a ticket gate was a symbol of technological might. It was about heavy steel, surveillance cameras, and complex mechanisms, a system that commanded obedience through intimidation, not trust. She simply could not comprehend Canada's minimalist approach. Does this system actually work? Anyone could just walk through for free, she scoffed. A male commentator beside her added, "Perhaps Canadians are just too polite to jump a barrier, no matter how small." Another wave of laughter swept the studio. After the program aired, the clip went viral. The phrase, "Canada's dog gates," became a trending meme, a source of ridicule across social media. Canada, a nation that prided itself on its civility and functional society, had become an unexpected laughingstock. A few weeks later, however, Alice found herself traveling to Canada for a joint project, a collaborative study between SNCF and Via Rail Canada. And from the moment she stepped off the plane at Toronto Pearson International Airport, she began to realize just how shallow her mockery had been. She was about to discover that within those gates she'd derided as fit for dogs lay a philosophy of trust that France had perhaps lost, but that Canada continued to nurture. This is the story of how a French engineer, blinded by her own nation's prestige, came to understand the quiet, unassuming strength she had overlooked. And it is a story of the pride and principles embodied in the small gates we pass through every day, a testament to the soul of Canada. Alice Durand, 35, was a rising star in the technical division of SNCF, specializing in railway infrastructure design. Known to her colleagues as the Woman of Steel, she was meticulous, passionate, and fiercely patriotic, believing her work was fundamental to the strength of the nation. Her trip to Canada was for a joint initiative focused on improving the user experience. The goal was to compare the two countries' systems and learn from each other. A French television crew was documenting the visit, which had led to her infamous Doggate comment. But Alice already harbored a complex, almost resentful view of Canada. A few years prior, SNCF had implemented a special service offering complimentary first-class upgrades to Canadian passengers. It was a gesture of gratitude after a Canadian tourist had bravely risked his life to save a child during a railway accident in France, a beautiful act of corporate goodwill. The report that later landed on Alice's desk, however, painted a different picture. It detailed a litany of misconduct by some of the upgraded Canadian passengers. Trash left, strewn across seats, loud and disruptive behavior in the carriages, and even an instance of someone taking another passenger's luggage. These are the famously polite Canadians? She had thought, her initial respect curdling into disappointment and even a sense of betrayal. Have they changed? This experience had only deepened her national pride. For Alice, the pinnacle of railway technology was the TGV Paris to Lyon in just 2 hours. Its streamlined body, its smooth ride, its interiors designed with classic French elegance. This, she believed, was the true crystallization of engineering genius. She revered the artistry of Christian Lacroix, who had designed the TGV's seats, believing that technology and beauty were inseparable. So, she was less than enthusiastic about this business trip. What could we possibly learn from Canada? She mused, gazing out the airplane window. With the documentary crew in tow, she put on an even more confident smile, her mind steeped in the conviction that French railways were the world standard. She had no idea that in a few days, this conviction would be shattered. The moment she stepped into the arrivals hall at Toronto Pearson International Airport, Alice caught her breath. The floors gleamed, so clean they reflected the lights like a mirror. The very air felt crisp and clear. The staff at the immigration counters greeted her, and everyone else with warm, genuine smiles. "Welcome to Canada, eh?" one officer said, and the simple phrase warmed her heart in a way she hadn't expected. Signage directing passengers to baggage claim was clear and multilingual English, French, and several other languages. The queue moved with a silent, fluid grace. No one jostled for position. No one looked agitated. The flow of people was as smooth as a river. "How can it be this efficient?" she whispered to a colleague. He shrugged. "They're probably just putting on a show for the cameras." Even so, a feeling began to grow in Alice's heart, a sense that this was more than just a performance. On the ride from the airport to her hotel, she watched the cityscape pass by. The streets were spotless. Traffic lights switched with digital precision, and every car maintained a respectful distance from the one ahead, moving with a mechanical orderliness that was somehow not cold or oppressive. It was a world away from the chaotic, horn-blaring streets of Paris. A few days later, she would read a news report that in the 2024 Skytrax World Airport Awards, Toronto Pearson was frequently ranked among the top airports for customer experience and cleanliness in North America. Paris's Charles de Gaulle, meanwhile, often struggled to make the top lists. Alice let out a wry smile. So, it wasn't a fluke. Clean and friendly, she conceded to herself. But that's just service. It has nothing to do with their railway technology. She boarded the UP Express train to the city center, determined to maintain her professional skepticism. The train pulled away from the station so smoothly, with so little vibration, that she once again felt that strange, indefinable sense of unease. Something was fundamentally different here compared to France. She just didn't know what it was yet. The next day, Alice and the French delegation visited the headquarters of Via Rail Canada for a tour. They were greeted by a man named Mr. Davies, the head of international partnerships. He offered a gentle bow and welcomed them in perfect English. "Welcome, everyone. We're so pleased to have you today. First, I'll give you a tour of our facilities at Union Station." Mr. Davies, dressed in a simple but well-fitting suit, was the kind of person who chose his words with great care. Even through the translator, Alice could feel his sincerity. A typical Canadian, she thought, with a small, patronizing smile. But that smile would soon vanish. Descending an escalator into the heart of the station, they came upon a series of sleek, silver devices lined up in perfect rows. The gates. As each passenger tapped their transit card, a soft electronic chime sounded, and the thin barriers flicked open and shut in an instant. The entire motion was so quiet and seamless it was startling. "And this," Mr. Davies said, gesturing toward them, "is our ticketing system. This?" Alice couldn't help but frown. Snickers rippled through her colleagues. It was nothing like the heavy, imposing steel barricades they were used to in France. These gates were barely waist-high, like delicate wings opening and closing. "It's so flimsy," one of her colleagues whispered. "A child could jump right over it." "In Paris, this would be destroyed in 3 days," another added. Their sarcastic remarks echoed in the corridor. The cameraman eagerly filmed their reactions, and the director nodded with satisfaction. "This is great footage," he murmured. This was the very scene that would later send the French television studio into hysterics. Fare evasion must be rampant, Alice said, her tone dismissive. The sensors look slow too. Anyone could slip through. Mr. Davies simply smiled his gentle smile. Please, why don't you try passing through yourselves? As they walked through one by one for the cameras, Alice suddenly stopped. She watched the flow of commuters. No one was trying to cheat the system. Hundreds of passengers streamed through, yet there was no pushing, no chaos. The rhythmic beep of the card readers was like a steady metronome, and people seemed to move in unison with it. Mr. Davies continued, his voice calm. This gate system can process over 60 people per minute. It wasn't designed primarily for prevention, but to ensure the uninterrupted flow of our users. Not for prevention. The words echoed in Alice's mind. The French system was built on a foundation of suspicion. The Canadian system was built on a foundation of trust. Standing before a single ticket gate, the profound difference between their two cultures became starkly clear. Gazing at the backs of the commuters walking away, Alice couldn't help but picture the train stations of her home country. People cutting in line, shoving aggressively through the turnstiles, guards shouting at offenders. She had always accepted that as a normal, unavoidable part of daily life. Now, that assumption was silently crumbling. As the laughter of her colleagues faded, the only sound left in the station was the light, cheerful chime of the gates. What lay beyond the ticket gates was not the familiar chaos Alice expected. She stopped in her tracks, stunned into silence. It was like looking at the surface of a placid lake. Despite it being the morning rush hour, the platform, where hundreds of passengers should have been waiting, was utterly calm. There was no pushing, no loud conversations. Business people in suits, students, tourists, everyone was queued up neatly behind small, painted arrows on the platform, quietly waiting their turn. No one broke the line. When a space opened up, someone would naturally step forward to fill it. Without a single word or instruction, the entire crowd seemed to be breathing in unison. Why isn't anyone telling them what to do? Alice asked, genuinely bewildered. Beside her, Mr. Davies smiled. In Canada, queuing isn't just seen as a rule. It's a deeply ingrained sense of mutual respect and yielding to one another. That idea has created its own order. His words struck Alice like a physical blow. She had always believed that order was created by command. But the scene before her was an order built, not on authority, but on trust. She was beginning to realize that the value of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, was an organic part of life here. The train arrived, its doors sliding open. As one, the entire line of people took a collective step backward, allowing passengers to disembark. Not a single person moved forward until the last person had stepped off the train. In the quiet, the only sound was the metallic whisper of the wheels on the track. Then, the queue began to move, everyone boarding the carriage calmly. No one was anxious, no one complained. She thought of the arguments and the frantic scrambles for seats she saw on French platforms every day. She used to see that chaos as a sign of passionate, human vitality. Now the thought filled her with shame. I think I finally understand, Alice murmured to herself, why those little ticket gates don't get broken. It wasn't rules that drove Canada's railways. It was trust, not surveillance, but self-discipline. Not machines, but the human heart. Before she could finish the thought, the train began to move, as smoothly as a cloud drifting across the sky. Alice held her breath and watched her watch. The second hand ticked over, perfectly aligned with the scheduled departure time. The current departure deviation is 0, Mr. Davies said quietly beside her. There was no boastfulness in his voice, only a quiet affirmation of daily, diligent effort. Alice exhaled slowly and let a small smile form on her lips. It wasn't a smile of scorn or irony, but one that comes from being genuinely moved. This is astonishing, she said. I've never experienced such a quiet departure. It's as if time itself is gently accommodating people. Mr. Davies's eyes crinkled at the corners. Yes, In Canada, we believe our railways should align with the rhythm of people's lives, not just the ticking of a clock. The machine measures the flow, but it's people who feel it. That phrase sank deep into her heart, to align with the rhythm of people's lives. Her entire understanding of the word precision was quietly being redefined. Next, Alice's group moved from the local commuter platforms to the one for the intercity express train. Though it was the same station, the very density of the air seemed to change. It was a sensation she had never felt before. The moment she stepped onto the express platform, Alice held her breath again. Hundreds of people stood in line, yet the air was so still and clear that the sound of the wind and the distant announcements echoed as if in a cathedral. It was as if time itself was holding its breath. "Why is it so quiet?" she whispered. Mr. Davies smiled warmly. "Here, quiet isn't about Rene, about enduring silence. It's a form of courtesy, a way of not disturbing another person's time. For example, when we take our own trash with us after a meal, it's not just to avoid troubling staff, it's a consideration for the next person who will use that space." This culture of mutual yielding has been passed down from parents to children for generations. That consideration is the foundation of our society. At his words, a warmth spread through Alice's chest. Mutual yielding as a culture. It was a concept she had never encountered. In France, silence was often a symbol of boredom or tension. Here, it felt like a collective prayer connecting people. As she stepped into the train carriage, she immediately understood what he meant. The seats were immaculate, without a speck of dust. The windows softly reflected the light from outside. A passenger across the aisle finished a drink and silently slipped the empty can into their bag. People walking down the aisle would give a slight nod as they passed one another. Everyone respected each other's presence, as if connected by an invisible thread of civility. As the train moved, the setting sun bathed the carriage in a warm, golden light, illuminating the faces of the passengers. Some read books, others dozed, and many simply watched the landscape glide by. The silence was not empty, it was a harmonious chorus resonating in the heart. In that moment, Alice understood. The quietness of Canadians was not a lack of words, it was an act of consideration, a prayer for the well-being of others that had become so ingrained in daily life it defined the character of the nation. They communicated not with words, but with actions. That was their strength. How different this is from the French way, she thought. Her reflection in the window no longer held a look of comparison, but one of deep contemplation. An announcement came over the intercom. "We are currently running on schedule." Alice, smiling, turned to Mr. Davies. "What is the margin of error for on schedule?" The annual average delay for Via Rail's corridor service is under 30 seconds. 30 seconds. For the entire year. For a moment, she couldn't process the words. 30 seconds was barely enough time to catch one's breath, and that was the total average delay over 12 months. Her mind understood the number, but her heart couldn't grasp it. In France, a single traffic light could cause an hour's delay on a bad day. Rain could shut things down. Delays were just an accepted part of time itself. As this realization dawned on her, she felt a profound warmth deep in her chest. Later, at a training facility, she watched as train operators, their faces taut with concentration, ran simulations. "We can feel a 5-second deviation in our bodies," one young operator explained. Alice let out a sigh of admiration. In France, if you told someone they were running 5 seconds late, they'd probably go on strike, she said, her laughter trembling as if holding back tears. Within this seconds-level precision, there was a profoundly human element. On the final day of their visit, Alice and her team were taken to Via Rail's Central Operations Control Center. A massive screen covered an entire wall, displaying the movement of countless trains as points of light, pulsing like a giant mechanical heart. Staff members communicated calmly through headsets. No one raised their voice. No one showed any sign of stress. In this room, a 1-minute delay is treated as a major incident, Mr. Davies explained, his words lending a sudden gravity to the air. He went on to describe their response systems for extreme weather events like blizzards or floods. When sensors detect the earliest signs of trouble, an AI immediately analyzes the data, calculating the safest and most efficient rerouting options faster than any human could. But the final decision, he stressed, is always made by a person. Technology exists to protect people, not to surpass them. It's perfect, Alice whispered, awestruck. She had never seen a place where the relationship between technology and humanity was so harmoniously balanced. Deep within the cold, hard data, she could feel the warmth of human care. It was a gentle perfection that made her heart tremble. But what moved her most was the unveiling of the next generation train, presented as a symbol of the future. A large-scale model sat silently before them. Our goal is a higher top speed, of course, the presenter said with a smile. But the most revolutionary feature is its quietness. A video played, showing the train levitating slightly on a magnetic cushion, gliding forward without the sound of metal on metal, only the whisper of parted air. It's as if the future is approaching, silently and without fanfare, Alice thought. Her thought felt less like an observation and more like a prayer. Mr. Davies spoke softly. Canada's railway doesn't exist to be the fastest. It exists to deliver people to their destination safely, reliably, and with peace of mind. How? In that instant, something inside Alice melted. In France, speed was a point of pride, but in Canada, quietness was proof of trust. Not flashy, but flawless. This is an island of civility. Moving silently toward the future, she thought with conviction and quietly closed her eyes. The night before her departure, sitting in the hotel lobby, Alice received an email. It was from the research team at the television network she had appeared on. The subject line read, "Regarding the first-class passenger conduct incident." She clicked it open and gasped. The investigation had concluded that the misbehaving passengers in France, the ones who had soured her view of an entire nation, were not Canadian. They were tourists from another country who had used sophisticated counterfeit passports. In that moment, a sharp pain shot through her heart. The images of Canadians queuing so perfectly on the platform, of them waiting so patiently, flashed before her eyes. No one argued. No one pushed. The reality she had been unwilling to believe was now presented to her as concrete fact. "I was wrong," a faint whisper escaped her lips. It was not a lament for her own ignorance, but a deep regret for having seen the truth without recognizing it. This wasn't the pain of defeat, it was the beginning of a profound lesson. On the plane home, she opened her notebook. Trust, quiet, human-centric design, words she had learned in Canada, filled the page. The idea of applying these concepts to France's railways began to burn quietly within her. Back in France, Alice stood before her department heads. "I propose a system built on a foundation of trust," she announced, "not one designed to control its users. The era of building our stations on the assumption that people are untrustworthy is over." End quote. At first, her colleagues scoffed, but she did not give up. Months later, a newly built station in a regional city incorporated Alice's proposed trust-based flow design. They reduced the number of surveillance cameras, widened the corridors, and created a layout that naturally encouraged people to yield to one another. The results were astonishing. Disputes and conflicts decreased. Operational efficiency improved. "The station feels calmer now," users reported. "We feel safe bringing our children here." Every time she heard such feedback, Alice felt a warmth in her chest. Even a security guard remarked, "It's incredible. We have fewer cameras, but people seem to have become gentler." Standing on the completed platform, feeling the wind on her face, Alice smiled. Quietness is born from trust. The morning she witnessed in Canada still echoed in her heart. A few weeks later, A French public broadcast channel aired the special documentary about their trip. The title was Canada, the Nation Driven by Silence. The program opened with Alice's journey, starting at Toronto Pearson. It showed the nearly silent platforms, the perfectly orderly queues, and the sight of people flowing like a single organism through the small ticket gates. In the studio, the audience, which had once laughed, grew quiet. The narrator's voice came on. Within these small ticket gates lies a philosophy of trust the world may have forgotten. At the end of the program, the guests in the studio began to applaud. It was not a boisterous cheer, but a quiet, respectful ovation filled with awe. A commentator, one of the men who had mocked the gates, spoke into his microphone. How ironic! We joked that Canada's ticket gates were for dogs. In truth, it was our own cynicism that was barking mad. Those aren't small gates, they are doorways to trust. End of quote. His words silenced the room once more. Then someone whispered, Canada's strength is in its silence. The program was syndicated by media outlets around the world. Social media flooded with comments. A culture of civility, not brute force, is what creates a world-class railway. Trust is a more powerful security feature than any sensor. They are not driven by rules, they are driven by heart. The quietness of this place brought tears to my eyes. End quote. Beneath one of the articles was a photo of the new French station Alice had designed. Sunlight streamed onto the platform, and the people walking there wore expressions that were part proud, part gentle. The final narration played softly over a closing shot of Toronto. Canada's ticket gates are not just gates. They are a blueprint, a design for the human heart, drawn from a trust called Canadian civility. The screen faded to white, and a final line appeared. Silence is not empty. It is full of trust.